Welcome to episode 2 of The People Make the Places, Mike May and friends. Greetings from my backyard. I decided I'd really like to encourage more recordings with actualities. I've got the fountain going in the background, an airplane going overhead. We might have the chimes jingling here a little bit. This podcast goes into the highs and lows of different travels, the sounds as we go, tools we use, people we meet, and lessons we learn. Independent travel for blind people goes back 200 years to James Holman, who was a Navy seaman and traveled around the world once he went blind and was one of the most famous people in the world, as famous as kings. And a book was written about him called A Sense of the World by Jason Roberts. Jonathan Mosen, the consummate podcast producer and creator, told me that you really need to choose a persona that you're speaking to when you create a podcast. I've chosen Ralph Emery. We had scores of tape letters between each other from 1974 until he passed away about 3 or 4 years ago.
Hello, Mike. This is Ralph. It's February 4th, a Monday, and it's 5:30 in the morning. I go to bed very early and I wake up very early. At night, there's not much to do, and it's so incredibly cold. The only warm place is bed. I got your tape letter last Wednesday, and again, it was sure good to hear from you.
I'm going to be honoring Ralph as I think and tell these stories, just as though I was taping to him as I did many, many times before. And I'll honor other people that are important in my life, career development. My wife, Gina, is the blind woman of action. You can find her on Instagram and TikTok that way. And she's a force to be reckoned with. When traveling, if somebody crosses us or some sort of injustice happens, Gina is the person you want on your side. Also, I want to be learning from each other, crowdsourcing travel stories. So be thinking about contributions you can make and capture audio as you go on trips. Typically, people are shooting video and capturing photos and sharing them. But if you can get a good recorder, I'm using right now the Zoom Essential H4. I'm going to carry that with me on all my trips to capture really good audio. The next podcast is likely to be about Ireland and Scotland. We just came back from Bali, so there'll be something about that in the near future. I want to do something on the crashing through experience with Robert Kurson and interview him about writing that best-selling book about me in 2007. In terms of tools and techniques and technology, I went to Japan in 1987 and again in 2012. And the big difference that I can think back on was the communication. In 87, I didn't even have a cell phone, of course. And so making a phone call was a very complicated process that was expensive and difficult to do. Communication, by email was, of course, an option. And then in 2012, I did have a cell phone, but you had to get a local SIM card where you went in Japan, or you had to pay a lot of money. And now in 2024, you can just pay $12 a day, and your cell phone will have unlimited calls and data. So here are the Lamara family telling you about Japan.
My name is Parissa Lamara, and I am the mom to the 2 kids. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
My name is Mina. I'm 16, and I also went to Japan.
I am Brennan. I am 20 years old, and I was also in Japan.
I'm Bart. I am the stepfather and husband that went on the trip.
This was an amazing trip, and I think people would be interested in hearing about how it got started. This is Mike May, and I'm on the board of Flight for Sight. Tell us about that organization, Parissa, and how you guys got picked.
Well, it was actually our second go at it. Flight for Sight is an organization that gives away three $10,000 travel grants to 3 winners each year. This was their second year doing it. And it's a brand new company. It's an awesome concept that was thought up by the main guy. His name's Mike Walsh. And he wanted to give the opportunity of travel to other people with visual impairments, I think in the hopes of spreading awareness and educating. And so this was our second time applying. My family and I, we applied to go to Japan with the $10,000. And the only caveat is that you have to travel with the person who's blind or visually impaired. I've got two. So we checked, we have that one covered. So we applied and we decided to go to Japan and to Anjo, Japan in particular, because we live in a city called Huntington Beach in Southern California. And our sister city is in Japan and it's Anjo, Japan. And we had heard, because none of us have ever been there, that Japan is much more accessible for the blind. And so we wanted to go to the sister city, check out how they do things and how different places in Japan provides the accessibility in their infrastructure for the visually impaired and blind, and bring those ideas back to our hometown because they're redoing their downtown. And so we applied again, and through the grace of all things good, we got accepted this time and won the $10,000 and got to go as a family to Japan for, it should have been 9 days, but 8 days. So it was awesome. We just got back last week.
Mina, tell me about the travel going over there. And you're with your family, so you don't have to really navigate on your own. But how was it navigating, dealing with the airport, long flights, and any weird blind stuff that might have happened or people might have said to you?
Airports are always an experience. There's always something that happens. So Japan was a little bit better because I was with my family, so there was a sighted assist. But we actually did ask a gate assist to help us at the airport to help us get through TSA a little bit easier. No, the thing I could think of really that particularly blind weird that happened.
Good things happened on Zip Air.
Oh, yes. So we flew Zip Air, which is one of the few airlines that goes from LAX, Los Angeles to Tokyo. And I believe it's a law where the flight attendant actually has to come tell you where the bathrooms are, where the closest exit is, and where your like oxygen mask will come from, and then how to like summon someone if you need someone. And I have only had that happen a couple of times, but the Japanese flight attendants actually came. They told us all the things.
The best part was that the kids couldn't see was that the Japanese flight attendants showed them the little placard card that's got all the pictures.
Oh yeah, I could tell she had really long nails. She'd like tap it. She'd like, and you can go shopping here. I was like, okay.
Where did you go? Did you go straight to Tokyo? What was your first stop?
Well, we first landed in Tokyo, which was insane. I figure we'll talk about that in a second. It was like New York City on drugs in the best way. There were massive billboards and throngs, and I mean throngs of people going this way and that. There were advertisements and like all kinds of different smells and sounds, and it was very humid. It was actually quite like overstimulating at times, but we made it through. And being blind, it was quite the experience, like experiencing a completely foreign city for the first time.
I mean, you're with your family, but did you find people were helpful, or maybe Chris or Bart should comment on, were people looking at you, two blind kids with canes and so forth?
Well, I mean, I get stared at like usual, but
I think people usually are looking at us when we're walking.
We only got a couple glances. I don't think anyone outright stared.
One of the things that we experienced in Tokyo was it was very similar to New York City, where everyone was very fast paced and they just went for it. As in, when you're crossing a street, if you're trying to get into a subway, move around, you had to basically bully your way around if you wanted to get on a subway, if you wanted to get in line somewhere. And not everyone, we were a sighted guy. The kids had their canes, and there are times where we had them fold their canes up and put them on their luggage, depending on where we were at, because there's a lot. They had to carry their luggage behind them like a wheeler, like a roller luggage, whatever you call it, like a carry-on, and then the cane, and then hold on to us. So it was difficult in Tokyo with the transportation, stairs, etc., to kind of hold both. So some people would see the cane, but a lot of people didn't because they were so focused on getting where they needed to go. So it was a little bit of a challenge, I would say, navigating Tokyo, because I don't think that they had any clue who they were trying to go around, blind or not.
When I was in Japan and on a bus, they had people whose official job was to be the packer. So they're at the front and they're just shoving you all together like sardines. Was that happening?
We were definitely very squished together for sure.
No, there was no packers, but there was definitely experiences where we were sardines. I took a picture. In fact, when we first got to Tokyo, obviously many, many hours of flying, tired, like not sure day or night. Just the timing was it's a 16-hour time difference. But we were in the airport. We had to figure out the trains because where we were staying was at least an hour train ride away. And, you're for all intents and purposes illiterate because a lot of everything is in Japanese, right? So even for us sighted, we had to, and we're jet lagged and we don't know where we're going. And the subway and train system in Japan is amazing.
It is.
But it's a labyrinth. And it took us, I would say, a good couple of days really to kind of figure it out. So at the beginning, I took a picture. We were on either a bus or a train or something, and I couldn't even see Bart. Like he was like so many people had come in between him and I that I put my phone up in the air and took a picture to try to find where's Waldo? Where's Bart? Trying to find him.
This is Gina Harper, and I wanted to ask a question on Mike's wife. My question is, when Mike and I went, the language barrier was an issue. And so we found little tricks and tips to deal with the language barrier, both being blind. How did you guys deal with the language barrier?
We used a lot of Google Translate. We learned basic thank you, excuse me, things like that. So in Japan, a lot of things are labeled in Braille. The numbers are the same like in elevators, but the bidets are labeled in Braille. There's a bidet in every bathroom. Problem is the Braille is in Japanese. So by the end of the trip, I knew what some things meant. But the one in our hotel room is our first hotel room when we got there was confusing and very, very high tech with many buttons.
Behind an airplane control
You
panel.
needed a master's degree to use a toilet.
Except there were violent jets of water.
Yeah, it wasn't the kind of thing you wanted to go push buttons because you didn't know what was going to happen.
What we decided to do is we met a woman at the hotel, one of very few people that did speak English, and we had her write out on index cards that we wanted to go from Osaka to Kyoto and back, and that we were looking for a certain kind of restaurant. So we would go with nobody speaking English there and show them our little index card, and we would get information that way. So that was the best way we figured to navigate it.
I have a question for you two.
Mhm.
Yes.
So when we're in Tokyo, my mind is thinking about trying to just get through the current situation of how do we get to the next train, trying to get to the hotel, point A to point B. But then when I had some time to relax, my mind is wandering that where I'm having a difficult time adapting to the trains, and I can see the maps. I can physically see where the trains are going, and I still had a learning curve. And I was wondering if the kids were alone, how would they be able to navigate a major city like that? And you two being well-traveled, and maybe this isn't the platform for, maybe it would be a webinar in the future, but being able to, pass on that information to myself and Chris and the kids of how you guys are able to, get from point A to point B efficiently and safely and do the things that you want to do.
No, it's a good question. And the short answer is you just have to go for it. I mean, traveling in your own language country is complicated. Then you take away that language capability, or let's say you reduce it by 90%. It gets even harder because a lot of what you do is you ask people, where's this and where's that? And we did do that. And when we had these little cue cards, that helped in those situations because we did have to ask people, and we did navigate the trains and found our way from the station to the tourist sites and to restaurants. But here, probably we might ask, 1 out of 3 people and you'd get a decent answer. There, you might have to ask 10 people before you got some good information. The podcast I'm starting up is called The People Make the Places because I've found in my travels, I'm not really thinking about, we were in Osaka. I'm thinking about the person we met, Mutsuki.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mutsuki.
So, that's what I remember about Osaka is particularly her. Who were some of the people and memories that you guys will reflect on when you think of the people you met on your trip to Japan?
Japanese breakdance.
We met a Japanese breakdancer the last night.
A blind
A blind Japanese breakdancer. And I had corresponded with him on Instagram because we've got the Instagram account. And he had liked something or messaged me or sent something a while back. And this was even before the grant. And so when I figured we were going, I started reaching out to him again, and he speaks very little English. And so I told him, we're going to be in Japan. We would love to meet you if it's possible. And somehow it all worked out. We ended up meeting him the last night. And there was a major language barrier. There was a lot of Google Translate. We went out to dinner. He gave the kids a breakdancing lesson in a studio that they paid for.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was really, really
It's
good.
really cool experience.
They ordered for us, like the locals, like we got to have, but like even questions I would put on Google Translate and I would ask, they would answer something completely different. So there was a total language barrier. But the point of all this is I asked him, what's the hardest part about being blind or in Japan, or how did the Japanese like look
Address the blind,
Address-
the blind.
Yes, culturally. And what he answered was that it always comes down to the kindness of people. It doesn't matter where you are and like what they have in place. It comes down to the kindness of people.
Mm.
And I think that is true across the board, anywhere you travel in the world. Even if you're blind or sighted, like it comes down to the kindness of the people. So I agree with you. It's the people that make a difference. And then I'm going to let the kids talk about who made a difference for them.
Now, how old was he?
Like
32.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he come by himself to dinner with you, or did he have somebody else with
Yeah.
him?
Sighted friend.
He had a homie.
He had a sighted homie.
Uh-huh.
He had RP, so I think we went to dinner when it was dark. So I think he had someone with him because that was
We're also
the time
on
he
the
could.
ground.
Did he have a cane? Did he have a
He
white
had
cane?
two.
He had 2 kids.
He had one cane for like walking, and he had one cane for dancing, for break dancing.
Really?
Fun.
Yeah,
Did they use the term breaker over there?
they do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That man could
what he
do
said.
some insane body movements.
Yeah, he was really cool.
I had never
He
been there.
experienced how hard break dancing was.
Sounded like he was tap dancing with his everything.
Some additional things that were really cool about him was so 2 things. One, he was a pharmacist. So that was his job. And
Wow.
he answers the phone as the pharmacist. And I'm not sure if he's working with directly filling prescriptions or support. It was hard to have that conversation, but he was a pharmacist. And then the other thing that he did when they were doing sighted guide through Tokyo at night, he was utilizing his cane. They were smaller sweeping motions. And where the kids, when we're doing sighted guide in Japan, we're almost in line, like directly behind us because no one else knew. He was almost on the side, just doing smaller sweeping, and they were able to get to the city pretty well.
That was,
Canes were also smaller too.
yeah.
They like shorter canes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like in Europe, when we go there, sometimes they're using canes like to their belly button, and it's just they're
They
very
reached
short.
the floor.
He could
Yeah.
never.
So that was actually a really good memory for me. It was walking through the streets of Tokyo at
I
night
shook the locals.
behind 3 people with canes. And, it's so alive, that city. And it was a cool memory.
We're an armada of blind people.
Japan is very set up for the blind, but we saw no other blind people. So I think the people were a little startled to see so many.
When
blind
you
people.
say set up for the blind,
Yeah.
in what way?
They had, so by set up for the blind, they had groups in the sidewalk that would lead you on they'd help you keep a straight line of travel, or in the train stations, they would lead you to like the ticket counters or like the electronic ticket scanners. And then once you were down in the actual, like on the train platform, they would lead you to where the train doors would line up to, which is pretty cool.
So we called the foot braille. There was a lot of foot braille, like these grooves in the ground, and they were differentiated by either dot circle,
Like bumps, like
or by
here.
long lines that you could feel that were like grooved into the sidewalk. And sometimes when you cross the street, the grooves would take you all the way across the street so the person can't veer, which was really nice. There was a lot more audible intersections.
Almost all of them.
Beeped or sang songs or made little bird chirps.
Mom loved imitating the bird chirps.
Yeah.
They were catchy. But the foot grooves were awesome. It also a little overwhelming unless you know the route.
For sure.
So you would still have to like learn the route and then be able to use them. But the fact that they led you to exactly where the train doors will open was huge. One of them, we followed one that led to a tactile directory of the whole building,
Oh, that was neat.
which I thought was awesome. So there was a lot more things already built into the infrastructure.
So from Tokyo, you went to your sister city for Huntington Beach, right?
We did. We spent 3 days in Tokyo, and then we went to Anjo for 1 day, and then we went to Kyoto for 3, and then back to Tokyo for 1.
And what did you do in Anjo, and what was that experience like?
Yes, we mailed many, many postcards.
Anjo was the most like, I wouldn't say empty, but I wouldn't say normal either, but he was the most chill city we went to. Like lots of like normal scale traffic. It wasn't the insanity of Tokyo, and Kyoto was rather a lot as well. But like Anjo was the most Huntington Beach like.
We went to the city council of Anjo too.
How was that? Did you learn anything from them about their practices that you did want to bring back to Huntington Beach?
It was pretty cool. There was definitely a language barrier. We'd ask them a question and they go like, oh, okay, we get it. And then they go scuttling away and then come back in like 5 minutes and give us an answer. And then eventually they led us upstairs and showed us this big giant book. And eventually figured out that it was a law book for all of Japan. So we learned that the lines on the sidewalk, and there's also bumps in front of all stairs and escalators. We learned that that's not just like in Tokyo, not like in big metropolitan cities, the like metropolises of like big giant cities. It's everywhere. It's like the Japanese ADA.
So it was actually really cool because they spent a lot of time with us. We were able to see that they were able to add it into their city plans. That's a requirement. And I think that is something that we'd be able to bring back. Hopefully, we can bring that back to Huntington when we meet with them and talk about how they've added these particular types of accessible technologies for their city.
They were extremely kind and welcoming and took the time to try to understand and explain. And they actually also explained that most blind and visually impaired and other people with disabilities, they're not mainstream. They go to special schools. They go to schools for people with disabilities. And we talked to our Japanese breakdancer friend, and he said that he went to a normal school because he was born with more vision, but he didn't have any support at all. And he said that any support he had was from his friends and not anyone from the school.
I also really like learning that Japanese teens and kids who are blind really love Harry Potter as well.
Anybody else besides the breaker that you met and will remember?
For sure. So we stayed in a traditional Japanese home for 3 days and we went to Kyoto. It was built 160 years ago. And I had this traditional tatami mats on the ground and like the paper screens in the doors. It was really cool. It was really low. The doors were really low, so Brennan and Bart hit their heads a lot. I was very grateful that I'm not tall. And the family that hosted us were the most incredible people. The dad of the family was named Sei, and he was so kind. Whenever we left the house, they would all come scurrying out of like different areas. Like one person would come out of the kitchen, one person would come out of like this door we didn't know existed. And they'd all like come to say goodbye or to welcome us home and like to set out slippers for us. There were slippers for everything. There were slippers for the house. There's slippers for the bathroom. There's slippers for outside. And then they made us this amazing Japanese breakfast every morning.
How did you guys connect with this family?
Through luck and divine intervention.
No,
Mom found them
through the internet.
hotels.com or whatever it's called.
Booking.com. In Kyoto in particular, they're known for having like a lot of natural hot springs, and they build traditional Japanese like inns around the hot springs. And you can go stay there and you sleep on the mats. They put the futons out for you. They feed you breakfast. You can go into the hot springs. This particular one didn't have springs on its premises, but every review I read was like 10 stars, exceptional. The breakfast is amazing. You got it. And so I chose this one because of, money. It was reasonable and the great reviews. And I was so grateful. I was a little worried when we first got there just because Bart and Brennan hit their heads so many times because everything was so low.
I eventually.
And the whole thing is like all paper doors because it's a traditional house. So I think Mina opened like the linen closet.
Oh my God. So many doors.
How many
The
times?
house of doors.
It's the house of doors. So at first I was like, oh, I don't know. But it was probably one of the best decisions and choices that we made in going to Japan.
For sure.
Oh, how fun. I do remember that now that you mentioned whacking my head on the door frames. They're such courteous, kind people. They would be incredibly upset.
Yes.
But,
Yes.
I was used to it. I had a hard head, and so I just went with it. But it was very upsetting to them.
Remember, like, speaking of the kindness that you just mentioned, Mike, I also hit my head on the door frame, like, really hard.
Really hard.
And
Like,
one of, like, twice, man. One of the members of the family, like, came out of nowhere and started, like, patting my shoulder.
Oh,
I was very tired.
that's neat. Anybody else other than that family?
There was a lady at the train station when we
Oh, yeah.
the first day in Tokyo, and in Japan you have to have something called a Suica card. So it's cash based, and you have to have a Suica card, and you can do it through Apple Wallet. But obviously, we didn't know all of this stuff, going into it. We had a vague idea, but we didn't realize everybody had to have their own. And so we were trying to buy train tickets for all of us, and we couldn't figure out anything. And this woman who spoke English and could tell that we were clearly foreigners and lost came up and asked us where we were going and what we were doing. And she told us we needed this week of cards. And she's like, look, how many tickets do you need? And I said, there's 2 of us and there's the 2 kids. And so she bought 4 tickets and she gave them to us. And then she looked at the kids and she realized that when I said kids, I didn't mean like little kids. Like these kids are obviously giant and they're adults. And she's like, oh, that's not going to work. And so she went back and bought 2 more tickets for adults. So she bought us 6 tickets and she just handed it to us and she's like, here, just go.
Wow.
Here you go. So it was really sweet. So then we got on the train and we stopped at the next stop. And then she was there again all of a sudden somehow, even though she got on a different train. And she was knocking on the door on the outside. And she's like, you need to switch trains now. You're on the wrong train. And so we got the door, we got on the right train and ended up going where we were going.
Well, that sounds like an angel that you met
No
there.
kidding.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
In the States, the trains have like a couple of times before there's an announcement. In Japan, they play like this whole serenade of bells and
Like
stuff.
minuet, like this whole thing.
What, is there any sort of follow-up? Is there anything you need to do with your own city council? And are you going to be in touch with any of these people? What happens now?
Yeah, we're in contact with city council. I personally go to a couple city council meetings just to for obviously other things to give public comments. And we're gonna work at a time that's best for them and either go to a city council meeting and present or do something private.
All in all, it was a wonderful, magical experience. And we thank Flight for Sight for their donation and like the experience of like doing all the. Yeah, thanks.
I want to know if you ended up eating anything that you didn't know what it was you were exactly eating and you were surprised by what you were eating.
Pretty much everything we ate, we weren't quite sure.
I just ate it,
Yeah. We had a really cool meal when we were in Kyoto, and it was a full traditional 10-course Japanese meal. And in that, we didn't know a lot of what we were eating. They'd set a plate or a bowl or some sort of box with compartments, and you just eat whatever was in there, and you ate it, and you shushed.
Wow.
And yeah, it was amazing. It was an experience.
The
That's
kids were better than I was. One of the things they put in front of us, like they have the most ornate, you would love this, little bowls and cups. And they learned how to use chopsticks. But anyway, so they put this little bowl in front of us and I took the lid off and it was like steaming something. And then whatever was on top of it was moving. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Why is it moving? What is that? And so I'm
My friend had said that I already eaten it.
I'm trying to tell Bart, I'm like, why is it moving? Like under my breath, because the chefs were like right in front of you. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings or
Right.
offend anyone, but I was like at the same time. So I just kind of moved the moving things to the side.
Oh,
Ate was what was underneath.
that's pretty great.
We later learned that they were just like dried tuna flakes, and that's like sort of chemical thing they move when they're hot. But yeah.
My first trip, I went to Japan. I went to 9 cities in 9 days. And
Wow.
I was with a colleague and he was very picky. And of course he could see what he was eating. And I just made the decision, both because of the language and otherwise, just eat everything. Don't ask. You don't want to know. And when I came back from that trip, they were all very thankful about me consuming all of their food and sake.
Oh, I love the sake.
I was going to tell you guys, I mean, Brennan is very adventurous and will literally try anything. I
Nice.
made him try natto. Was it natto?
No.
It's fermented soybeans.
Not
Wow.
Yes. And like when you open the container, there's like this weird, sticky, congealed goo. And it's not it again, he ate it.
Wow.
The Japanese person, they said they didn't like it either. So
Wow.
Well, and how did that family treat you from a blindness perspective?
when we first got there, they said, "Hey, like we've never had this before. Like we don't know what you guys need. Like, is everything okay? Like, do you need anything?" And we just said, "No, we're good. Like, we're fine."
until we started cracking our heads on door frames.
Uh-huh.
I remember something that happened that was interesting. We went to a museum called Team Lab.
Oh,
You guys remember this?
Yeah.
So there's a museum in Tokyo that is supposed to involve all of the senses. And I'd been told that it's something that we should do. And so I bought us tickets. And so we went to this museum and you go through it without shoes. So when you first get there, they make you take off your shoes and your socks. And that's because like as you're walking in, water starts to come down. And then you're like knee high in water in some places.
Wow.
It's really, really cool. But before we went in, they made us take off their shoes. They came and they cleaned the bottom of the
Yeah.
kids' canes because they're like, you can't go in there with those dirty canes. And then they wouldn't allow them to go in a particular room because it had like they called it an uneven surface. It was like basically like walking along on a mattress.
Oh,
Which I found highly annoying because I was like, let them choose if they want to.
I was expecting landmines or bear traps, but it was a mattress.
It was the mattress.
Yeah.
Like, even if
Wow.
it would have fallen, it would have been fine. But they were insistent that it's not safe and they can't go.
I was
oh,
gonna be a rebel and just start sprinting through the mattress, but you know,
Yeah.
Believe it or not, that was a very cool. It was pretty cool. It was very sensory involved for sure.
there are so many lights.
Yeah. Well, what an awesome trip. I guess just to close things out, why don't we just go around and make your final comments about the trip?
For me, it was a trip of a lifetime, and I really appreciate, they're not here, but Flight for Sight for giving the family the opportunity to be able to go do this. It was a really cool adventure for us, but on top of that, there was a lot of things that I learned watching the kids, we don't want to call them kids, but Brenna and Mina travel through Japan, utilizing their canes, just travel challenges that they're going to have with or without us in the future. So it was a really cool trip, and I'm grateful that we were able to have that opportunity.
I absolutely loved Japan. I loved the people. I loved the bathrooms. I loved everything that we came across. I had personally never really thought about going to Japan before, so this really opened my eyes, pardon the pun, to how cool places like that could be. I 100% want to go back. I want to go back during the cherry blossom time. And it was the most wonderful opportunity for us to have some amazing family time and watch the kids have different experiences that we would not have had otherwise, while learning about how a different country approaches accessibility for the blind.
For me, it was my first time out of the country. So I'd never been out of America before. And it was truly amazing to see a different culture, a different way of life. And it was, honestly, I have so many memories. People would ask, like, I just went back to school on Wednesday, and people would ask, what'd you do over the summer? And they'd open up a whole conversation. Oh, I did this and I did that and this happened and that happened. And I have so many memories, and we met so many amazing people and had so much amazing food. And the public bathrooms, as Mom said, are like revolutionary. Like they have like seats for babies, they have like bidets, they make noise like to cover up anything, and like they're very polite. Anyway,
nice.
I can't say this enough. It was just, it's not something I'll ever forget.
So Japan was a once in a lifetime experience, and once again, I and my family are very thankful to Flight for Sight for orchestrating it for us. We had like a litany of experiences that I will remember for the rest of my life. It was like really good times, both in a different culture and being immersed in a completely different continent, and with my family. And like I feel like it was really valuable bonding time for us to all like just enjoy each other's company for the most part.
Oh, that's great. I was excited when you guys won the trip, and I knew that you'd make the most of it and represent yourselves and blind people in Flight for Sight extremely well. This is Mike May and Gina Harper, and we're glad to have been some of the first to hear about your story. So I just, konbawa, arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you.
I'll definitely be thinking about the Lamara family next time I go to Japan. And I'm reflecting back on a few people I've met on my previous trips. I met a guy on the airplane who was a senior exec with IBM back in the 80s, Ray something. I stayed in touch. And then when I went to Japan, I had dinner at his family's house. There was Mr. Otsuki, or pronounced Otsuki, and he developed a Braille print combined device that I had, and which was very useful, so sighted people could follow along with the Braille embossing. When I went to Japan, he hosted me and my friend Rob Reese. I think of Chieko Asakawa, a blind woman who's a researcher and developer of indoor navigation technology and devices. I'd love to go explore the electronics market in Tokyo. There's devices there that aren't available anywhere else in the world. Quite a fun place to check out. So that's it for this episode. My thanks to Jonathan Mosen for his advice in getting these podcasts started. And I'm sure I'll have more questions for him. To Derek Lane, who puts the polish on the audio, please record your stories. I might set up a WhatsApp link so you can easily contact me there. This podcast is going to be, for now, on a monthly cadence. You can email thepeople@mikemay.org. Please share and rate this podcast. See you next time.